Okay, hi friends. This video is going to review the events of the cardiac cycle. I have included this diagram, which is the pretty much standard diagram you would find in any physiology textbook that would help go through all of everything that you saw in the first video on the cardiac cycle and the notes that are contained within the weekly list. This is in with the video and this. And so after you have watched this video and we've gone through this together, then I'm going to have you try working on this and go through and see if you can match up all of these parts, because I have done this in a second video. So you will be able to look at that after you've had a chance to do this assignment. It's not an assignment. This practice sheet, you don't have to turn this in, but it will really help you. Okay, so what we're going to look at, let's just take a look at what are the various things that we are keeping track of in the cardiac cycle. So we have these terms across the top. It says ventricular diastole, ventricular systole, and then ventricular diastole. So if you recall, things in diastole mean relaxed, so we don't have any relaxation, we don't have any contraction going on. Particularly in the ventricle, that's mostly what we're dealing with, but we will be taking a look at, is there some atrial relaxation or diastole going on as well. Then we have ventricular systole, and then followed by another time period of ventricular diastole. We have the ECG tracing, so we have the P wave, atrial depolarization. We have the QRS complex, which is ventricular depolarization. And then we have the T wave, which is ventricular repolarization. Let's also put right here that systole means contraction. Okay. All right. So during this time period right here, our atria are going to be relaxed. And then in this little period between the P, what we refer to as the PR interval, we're going to have atrial contraction. I'm just going to put that in there. You don't need to remember the contractions. Then during this whole time, this this QT segment is also ventricular contraction. And then this is, everything is relaxed during this, after the T wave, okay, until it's time for the atria to contract again. All right, now, we also have heart sounds right here. So this is the first heart sound. I'm just going to put lub beside it, and this is going to be the second heart sound. This is going to be the dub, and we'll take a look at what is responsible for that. Now, down here we are in, let me bring that a little closer. Okay, in this area, we are in pressures. So we're going to measure 3 different pressures. We're going to measure the pressure in the aorta. That's this green line. Notice that the pressure in the aorta is never going to exceed 120. Well, under normal circumstances, let's hope that somebody is normal. This is what we would refer to as our systolic pressure. When we're talking about blood pressure, when we take somebody's blood pressure, and then notice that it doesn't ever fall below 80, and that's going to be our diastolic pressure. All right, this blue line right here is left ventricular pressure. Now, this would also mimic what's happening in the right ventricle, but we're just doing what's happening on the left side of the heart because we're going to send the blood out to the rest of the body through the aorta. So that's why we're taking a look at what's happening just on the left side of the heart. But the exact same thing is going to happen on the right side of the heart at the same time. And then this purple line right here is the left atrium pressure. Okay, and that's going to vary. Then we have ventricular volume right here, so we can see that the volume goes up, then it pauses, and then it goes up to its maximum amount, which we will get to in a minute. And then it's going to drop, and then it's going to rise again. And we will take a look at all of those things. But the first thing that I want to do right here is take a look at the very first phase. So let me make this a little bit closer. There we go. All right. So this ventricular filling phase, we in your lecture or in your lab notes, I have as early diastole, T, and then mid to late diastole. So what that diastole refers to is the heart being relaxed, primarily the ventricles being relaxed, but the atria are also relaxed until right at the very end of late diastole. Oops, diastole. Okay, so we can also say during this early diastole that the heart is completely, make sure you can see that, relaxed. We have no contraction of the cardiac muscle whatsoever. We don't have any atrial contraction. We don't have any ventricular contraction. And so what is happening is that the blood is filling passively. So that means that we are not filling any of the chambers due to any type of contraction. So we have blood coming in from the superior vena cava. We have blood coming up from the inferior vena cava, entering into this right atrium right here, and or into the left atrium, either one. But we're just going to look at this one right here. So the blood is coming in, and it's filling the ventricle, but there's no force being exerted to fill the ventricle. The only force that's being exerted is the pressure of the blood inside of the atrium is greater than the pressure of the blood inside the ventricle, and therefore we're going to have this AV valve, or the tricuspid valve right here, is going to be open. So we're just going to put just a little note, tricuspid is open. Oops. I was going to say covered. Oh, I did it again. Okay, open. So both of the AV valves. I guess we can also do that one. So both AV valves are open at this point because the pressure inside of the atria is greater than the pressure inside the ventricles. So we are going to continue to fill the heart with blood until we get to about 70% filled. So if we back this out and we look at right here in our ventricular filling, we have filled up to this little pause right here. So this is going to be 70% filled. So we're going to have about 100 mils or 110 mils, something like that, maybe 100 mils. We're going to fill to this point. Okay. Now, up here in, let's back this out. Let's do it this way. Okay, if we take a look at the pressure, so remember the purple line is the atrial pressure and the blue line is the ventricular pressure. So this rise right here is due to the pressure of the blood entering the atrium. And then this is the pressure in the ventricle due to that same entering blood. But notice that the pressure in the atrium is larger than the pressure in the ventricle, just by a little bit, but enough to keep the AV valves open. And then it's going to keep increasing as more blood is returning back to the heart and then going down and then filling the atria and the ventricles. Now, if we come up here, we're going to get to a point right here at late diastole where the SA node fires, and that's going to cause atrial depolarization, and that results on an ECG as the P wave. So if we follow our P wave down, we can see that that is going to result in maximal contraction. So this rise, as it says right here, this rise in pressure is caused by atrial contraction. So what that's going to do is surge some more blood into the ventricle, cause that ventricular pressure to rise, and is going to result in the rest of the blood entering the heart. So when the maximum amount of blood is going to fill the heart in this heartbeat, we refer to this as end diastolic volume. So we are now at end diastolic volume. It's going to be 120 milliliters. And it says the volume of blood in the ventricle is greatest at the end of diastole because we have contracted the atrium, squeezed the rest of the blood into the ventricle, and that's the maximum of blood amount of blood that's going to enter the atrium. No, enter the ventricle at this point for this heartbeat. And we call that end diastolic volume. So this is the amount of blood that fills the heart during this diastole period, during this ventricular filling. All right, now what we need to look at here is this point right here. If we follow this point, so this is the start of this gold area, this narrow gold area. And if we go up here, we see we got this thing right here, which is our first heart sound, the lub-dub sound, or the lub sound. So the lub sound is due to the closing, we'll just put this over here, closing AV valves. Now, why would the AV valves close? Because at this point, we have now put all the blood into the atrium that we're going to put into the atrium. And so we're going to get more pressure inside of the ventricle, but we have to do one more thing to get more pressure in the ventricle, and that is the QRS complex, which is ventricular depolarization, which is going to lead to ventricular contraction. So now the ventricle contracts at this point, and you can see blue is now greater than purple. And when blue is greater than purple, then we have the closing of the AV valves and the first heart sound. So when ventricular pressure is greater than atrial pressure, we are going to get the closing of the AV valves. So let's go down and see what that phase is called. So when the atria start, or the ventricles start to contract, so this is because of the QRS right here. So now I get ventricular contraction. So first it'll be ventricular depolarization followed by ventricular contraction. We have now closed the AV valves. Now, because we're not fully contracting the ventricles yet, we've just pushed enough blood up here to close the AV valves. The chordae tendineae and the papillary muscles are hanging on to those cusps so they don't prolapse up into the atrium. We don't lose any blood into the atrium. There is just enough pressure to close the AV valves, but notice that the semilunar valves are not yet open. So if we follow this little gold area, this is when AV is closed. We'll just put that again. Okay, so now we have a period of time where the AV valve is closed, but you'll notice the volume of the ventricle has not changed yet. So that means that no blood is leaving the heart yet. So this time period right in here is number 2, the isovolumetric contraction phase. So isovolumetric contraction means no blood leaves the heart. Okay, so no blood is leaving the heart. We just have enough pressure to close the AV valves and not enough pressure to open up the semilunar valves. So that's going to be that short amount of time, but we're not stopping contraction. We are just now going to keep increasing contraction during this time period until we get to right here. So the pressure in the ventricle is climbing until we get to this point, but no blood during this gold period right here. No blood is leaving the heart. So we get to right here. And so right at this point, right here, there is enough ventricular force, contraction of the blood in the ventricle, that now we can open the semilunar valves. So at this point, we have semilunar valve is open. So the aortic semilunar valve or the pulmonary semilunar valve, depending on what side of the heart we're on. So now that's also this point right here. Okay, so the semilunar valves are open, semilunar valves are open. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that the blood in the ventricle is going to decrease because blood is entering the aorta. So let's take a look at what our pressure in the aorta was. So the pressure in the aorta was 80, which is our diastolic pressure. And that is the pressure just due to blood being in the vessel, not because there's any force being exerted on the blood. So now, as that blood fills, the pressure in the aorta is going to climb. Now notice that it is running right underneath what that ventricular pressure is. We are still contracting the ventricle, and the pressure is still rising till we get to about right there. And what that means is that there is now enough blood in the aorta that the pressure in the aorta and in the ventricle are pretty much the same. and I still have that semilunar valve open. And so now what we're going to do is allow even more blood to leave the ventricle, that's the blue line, and to go into the aorta. Now notice that aortic pressure is also decreasing. That's because the blood just doesn't sit in the aorta. This is the blood moving out to the rest of the body, and then this is the rest of the blood that's coming in. Finally, we're going to get to a point where we get to the T wave. And so the T wave is ventricular repolarization. And so what is happening, during this gold time, so once the semilunar valve is opened, now we come down here, and we have that is the ventricular ejection phase. So this is when blood is leaving the heart. And in the, we'll just go ahead and put that. Now blood leaves the heart. Okay. Let's also make sure we know on here, all valves are closed. Okay, so that's why we call it isovolumetric time, is because no blood is entering or leaving the heart because all the valves are closed. Okay, so blood leaves the heart because we opened the semilunar valve right here. And so now the blood that's leaving the heart is known as stroke volume. So all during this time period, this blood is leaving the heart. Now, how much blood is leaving the heart? Well, by the time we're finished contracting, so we've repolarized, and so now we're relaxing. We're going to come back to this in a minute. So now we're relaxing, and then finally all the blood that's going to leave the heart has left the heart, and so we're getting to a point right here called end systolic volume. So this is what's left. So what is left after ejection? Now, how much is that? It's 50 milliliters. So EDV, well, let's just go ahead and calculate it. So ED, or stroke volume, is going to be the difference between what we started with and what we ended with. What we start with is EDV, and what we end with is ESV. So we put some numbers in here. We want to find out how much actually left. We started with 120, and now we're going to remain 50 in the heart. So then our stroke volume was equal to 70 milliliters. Okay, so that's what our stroke volume is here. That's how much blood actually left the heart, is 70 milliliters. We'll just write that in there. Okay, now why doesn't any more blood leave the heart? Or why doesn't blood fall back from the aorta? So we're going to come right to here, to this point right here. Now, if we look up here, we see that the heart is repolarized, which means it's relaxed. So the pressure in the ventricle, right at this point right here, is now less. The blue line is less than the green line. So what's going to happen at that point is that the semilunar valve will close. So now that that semilunar valve is closed, we get the second heart sound. Okay, so this is closing of the semilunar valves. So I've been contracting, my heart finally repolarized, which means that the pressure is going to drop in the ventricle because it's relaxing. That initial decrease in pressure was less than the pressure in the aorta, and so that closed the semilunar valve. Now this dicrotic notch thing, what happens? So as I said, when we get to about halfway filled, then the blood is going out to the rest of the body. But then when the pressure decreases or stops altogether from the ventricle not contracting anymore, then the semilunar valve is going to slam shut, and then the blood is going to bounce off of it and then go increase the pressure just a little bit, and then it's going to go out to the rest of the body. So that's what that dicrotic notch is. That's the blood rebounding off of that closed semilunar valve. But I don't care that you know that. Okay, so we're going to come to what is this second gold area. So we know that the semilunar valve has closed and the pressure in the ventricle is decreasing, but it's still higher than what it is in the atrium. So we're still going to have a closed AV valve. So the bicuspid valve on the left side is still closed. So if we look down here, we are now in this section, which is isovolumetric relaxation. So I've closed the semilunar valves because there's enough pressure, enough back pressure in the aorta and the pulmonary trunk to close the semilunar valves. There's no more blood that we can use. This is the ESV down here. No more blood that we can use to open it up. The ventricle is relaxed, and there's not enough blood that has returned back to the heart into the atria to open up the semilunar valves. So again, we have no blood now. We're isovolumetric, so the pressure or the volume is staying the same, so no blood enters the ventricle yet because the ventricle is relaxed and it can't keep this open so that the blood can come back in. And so this isovolumetric relaxation is this time period when the semilunar valve has closed, but the AV valve hasn't opened up yet. The bicuspid and tricuspid valves haven't opened up yet. So now we have to wait until ventricular pressure, total relaxation, is less than what's in the atrium because blood is now entering back into the atrium. And so right at this point, this is when the AV valve opens. So this period right here, where the valves are both closed, is number 4, our isovolumetric relaxation phase. So we have 2 times when the ventricles are completely closed chambers. We have isovolumetric contraction, isovolumetric relaxation. During this phase, the AV valves are open in this ventricular filling. The AV valves are open, semilunar is closed. Then both are closed. During ventricular ejection, the semilunar valves are open. The AV valves are still closed. So semilunar valves are open, and then the semilunar valve closes at this point, and the AV valve hasn't opened yet until this point. And now once the AV valve is open, then blood can fill the heart again, and we do what we did over here. So let me just check my notes and to make sure that and why does the AV valve open over here? Just to add this so that you remember. The atria are filling again. So as the blood is returning both from the superior and inferior vena cava, then the atria will open up that AV valve and ventricular filling will happen again. Okay, I think that's all. So hopefully that's helped you have a better understanding of what is happening, the events of the cardiac cycle. So go through this. I mean, you can put notes on your paper like this, but then now I would like you to try this assignment or this worksheet and see how you do, and then you can come back to the next video, and that's where I walk through it with you, and then you'll have the answers. So good luck.